You think happiness is something you earn. You think it comes after the promotion, after the relationship gets better, after you finally get your finances under control, after the kids grow up, after you lose the weight, after you stop feeling so tired all the time. You were taught in ways so subtle you never noticed that happiness is the reward at the end of a long sequence of correct decisions. Do the right things, work hard enough, push through, be grateful, stay positive, and eventually, something called happiness will arrive and stay. That is what you believe. Maybe not consciously, but that belief is running inside you right now like a program you never installed, but somehow keeps executing. And here is the problem with that belief. It is not just incomplete. It is not just naive. It is structurally wrong, fundamentally, architecturally wrong. And because of that wrongness, millions of people spend their entire lives chasing something that cannot be reached the way they are trying to reach it. Not because they are weak, not because they are doing it wrong, but because the entire map they were given was drawn by people who also had the wrong map. That is what we need to talk about today. Before we go further, if this kind of content is what you have been looking for, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This type of reflection is rare. It is not clickbait. It is not motivation. It is an attempt to understand something true and uncomfortable about human experience. Your support helps this channel keep going and keep reaching people who need to hear this. So subscribe, leave a like, and let us continue. There is a model of life that most people in the modern world are operating inside of without ever questioning it. It goes something like this. You are born. You grow up. You learn that hard work produces results. You learn that discipline separates winners from losers. You learn that the people who have beautiful lives got there through effort, through sacrifice, through pushing harder than everybody else. You absorb this idea so deeply that it becomes indistinguishable from common sense. It stops being a belief and starts being the air you breathe. And this model would be fine, it would be reasonable. It would be worth following if it actually produced what it promises. But look around. Look at the most driven people you know. Look at the people in your life who work the hardest, who push the most, who sacrifice sleep and relationships and joy in the name of getting somewhere. Are they at peace? Are they filled with quiet satisfaction? Are they happy in a way that is stable and deep and not dependent on the next achievement? Some of them maybe, but most of them are not. Most of them are exhausted and anxious and secretly terrified that none of it will ever be enough. Most of them have achieved things that should have made them feel complete, and instead felt an absence, a flatness, a strange hollow disappointment they could not explain. They ran the race, they crossed the finish line, and the finish line moved. And here is what the model says when this happens. It says you did not work hard enough. It says you need to want it more. It says the problem is your mindset, your habits, your commitment. It turns the failure of the model back onto the person. It makes suffering personal when it is actually structural. It blames the body for the poison in the water. That is the model most people are living inside. And that model, that deeply embedded belief system, is exactly what Maslow spent his life dismantling. Not because he hated ambition, not because he was against success, but because he saw something in human beings that the model refuses to acknowledge. He saw that a human being is not a machine that outputs happiness when you feed it the right inputs. A human being is a layered, hierarchical organism whose experience of life is determined not just by what they are doing, but by which level of need they are operating from. And when those levels are confused, when someone tries to live at one level while being starved at another, the result is not just dissatisfaction. The result is a kind of quiet psychological collapse that looks from the outside like a personal failure, but is actually something else entirely. I want you to do something for a moment, not a thought experiment, something more personal than that. I want you to observe your own history. Think about a time in your life when you were deeply motivated, when you woke up with energy, when problems felt like challenges instead of threats, when you had momentum and things seemed to be moving in a direction that felt right. You do not have to think of a dramatic moment. It can be small, a period of weeks, a particular season of your life, just a stretch of time when something felt aligned. Now I want you to ask yourself a quiet question. What was present in your life during that time that is not present now? Not what were you doing, not what goals did you have, but what was present. Safety, maybe, a sense of belonging somewhere, a feeling of being understood by at least one other person, a basic physical rhythm of sleep and rest and food that was actually working, a sense, however faint, that your existence mattered to someone. Now think about a time when everything collapsed, when motivation disappeared, when getting out of bed became its own victory, when things that used to excite you became completely flat, when you went through the motions of your life but felt like you were watching someone else live it. And ask yourself the same question. What was missing during that time? Not what were you failing to do? What was absent that should have been there? Most people, when they do this honestly, do not identify willpower as the missing ingredient. They identify something far more basic: connection, security, rest, a sense of mattering, a feeling of being somewhere that was safe enough to breathe. That observation is not sentimental. It is not soft. It is actually the most important data point in the entire architecture of human motivation, and it is exactly what Maslow was pointing at. Now here is where everything changes. Here is the inversion that will either make complete sense to you or will feel deeply uncomfortable depending on how much of the old model you are still attached to. You have probably told yourself at some point that you lack motivation, that you are not disciplined enough, that something is wrong with your drive, your ambition, your will. You have looked at yourself and diagnosed yourself as someone who does not try hard enough, and from that diagnosis, you have built a whole strategy of self-improvement. Push harder, build better habits, fix the morning routine, change the mindset, become the person who does not quit. But here is the truth that changes everything. It is not a lack of motivation that is keeping you stuck. It is that you are trying to operate at a level of need that your system has not been adequately supported to reach. Read that again slowly. It is not that motivation is missing. It is that motivation cannot exist, cannot genuinely function, cannot sustain itself in a psychological environment that has not satisfied the needs that come before it. Motivation for growth, for achievement, for meaning, for self-expression, those are not things that appear when you push hard enough. They are things that emerge naturally, almost automatically when the layers beneath them have been adequately fed. And the inversion is this: the thing you are treating as the cause, your lack of drive, your lack of ambition, is not the cause at all. It is the symptom. It is the signal. It is your nervous system communicating something clear and specific that your culture has never taught you to hear. The system is not broken. The system is responding correctly to an environment that is not giving it what it needs at the level it actually needs. You have been trying to solve a structural problem with a motivational solution, and that is why it keeps not working. Abraham Maslow was a psychologist working in the middle of the 20th century, at a time when most of psychology was focused almost exclusively on what goes wrong with human beings. The dominant questions were about pathology, about disorder, about dysfunction. Maslow was unusual because he started asking a different question. He looked at people who seemed to be thriving, truly thriving, not just functioning or succeeding, but actually alive in a way that was different, and he asked what made them that way. What he found through decades of observation and study was not a personality type. It was not a genetic gift. It was not a superior work ethic. What he found was a pattern, a sequence, a predictable architecture of human need that, when understood properly, explained almost everything about why some people seem to be building their lives and others seem to be burning theirs down in place. He proposed that human needs are not equal. They are not flat. They are not interchangeable. They exist in a hierarchy, and within that hierarchy, the lower levels are not optional. They are not things you can skip because you are spiritually advanced or emotionally mature or sufficiently motivated. They are the foundation on which everything else must be built. And when the foundation is missing, everything built on top of it will be unstable, no matter how beautiful it looks from the outside, no matter how much effort went into constructing it. The lowest level is the most physical. The body needs food, water, rest, warmth, air. These are not preferences, they are requirements. When they are not met, nothing else matters. You cannot think about your legacy when you are starving. You cannot plan your future when your body is in crisis. The body speaks first and loudest, and it has no interest in your ambitions until its demands are satisfied. The second level is safety, not just physical safety, though that is part of it. Psychological safety, the sense that your environment is stable enough that you do not have to spend all of your cognitive resources scanning for threats. Financial instability lives here. Unstable relationships live here. Chronic unpredictability lives here. When this level is not met, when someone is living in a constant low-grade state of threat, the entire upper architecture of need becomes essentially inaccessible, not because they are weak, because the nervous system operating correctly has decided that survival takes priority over everything else. The third level is belonging, connection, the deep human need to exist inside relationships where you are known and wanted, not admired, not needed, known. The difference matters. You can be surrounded by people who need you and still feel completely alone, because what you are providing them has nothing to do with who you actually are. Belonging at this level means your existence is welcomed, not just your function. The fourth level is esteem, the sense that your own existence has value, that you matter, that you are capable, that you have something real to contribute to the world. This is not pride. It is the quiet internal acknowledgement that you are legitimate, that your presence makes sense, that there is a reason you are here. And then, above all of these, there is what Maslow called self-actualization, the level most people are desperately trying to reach, the level where you become what you are capable of being, where you express your full potential, where your life feels like it is aligned with something true inside of you. This is the level that books and podcasts and motivational speakers spend almost all of their time talking about. This is the level your culture tells you is the goal. And it is the level most people try to reach while completely ignoring the four beneath it. That is the error. That is the structural mistake. Not a character flaw, not a moral failure. A simple, devastating architectural confusion. If this is landing for you, if something in what you are hearing is resonating with your own experience, do me a favor and leave a comment telling me where you are watching from. I am not just saying that as a formality. There is something real that happens when you realize that what you have been calling your personal failure is actually a human experience that other people are navigating too. Sometimes knowing that other people are in the same place, grappling with the same confusion, changes something. So comment below, tell me where you are and what brought you here today. Now let us scale this out. Because everything we have been talking about so far has been personal, individual, your life, your history, your patterns. But Maslow's insight does not stop at the individual. It scales upward in a way that is, when you see it clearly, genuinely disturbing. Think about the culture you are living inside. Not your family, not your city, your culture. The set of values and assumptions and priorities that shape what is considered normal, what is considered successful, what is considered worth pursuing. What does your culture tell you is the highest expression of human life? What does it celebrate? What does it reward? What is the structure of it, the economy, the media, the education system, the social dynamics of it? What does all of that point toward as the pinnacle of human achievement? In almost every modern Western society, the answer converges on something like this: individual achievement, professional success, productivity, the accumulation of resources and status and influence, the optimization of personal output, the construction of a visible, impressive, enviable life. These are all fourth-level and fifth-level aspirations. These are esteem needs and self-actualization needs. These are the top of the pyramid. And what does the same culture do with the lower levels? It commodifies them. It monetizes them. It turns the need for safety into a financial product. It turns the need for belonging into a social media platform. It turns the need for rest into a luxury wellness industry. It charges you for access to things your nervous system requires to function, and then judges you for not functioning well when you cannot afford them. And then, on top of all of that, it tells you that if you are not reaching the top, if you are not actualizing, if you are not achieving and growing and becoming the best version of yourself, the problem is your mindset, your effort, your commitment, your willingness to sacrifice. The model does not acknowledge that it has removed the foundation. It just keeps telling you to build higher. And this is not a fringe observation. This is not cynicism or pessimism. This is what Maslow himself pointed toward in the later years of his work, when he started looking not just at individuals, but at the broader structures that shape whether human beings can even access the higher levels of their own potential. He understood that a person cannot self-actualize in a vacuum. They cannot reach the highest level of their humanity in an environment that is actively undermining the levels beneath it. This is why entire generations of people who are objectively more comfortable, more connected, more educated, more resourced than any generation in human history are reporting the highest levels of psychological distress ever recorded, not because they are weaker, not because they are more self-indulgent, but because the culture has perfected the upper floors of the building while rotting out the foundation. The comfort is real, the safety is not. The connection is everywhere. The belonging is not. The opportunities are abundant. The ground beneath them is not stable, and so you get what you see. A civilization full of people performing wellness while quietly collapsing, working toward goals that should feel meaningful and feeling nothing when they arrive, consuming unprecedented amounts of content about how to live better and feeling more lost than ever. This is not a coincidence. This is the predictable result of a culture-wide inversion of Maslow's hierarchy. Here is the part where your instincts are going to push back. I know this because it is where most people push back, because what I am describing, if you take it seriously, requires you to reconsider some things that are deeply uncomfortable to reconsider. If the problem is structural and not personal, then the solution is also structural. And that means the answer is not a better morning routine. It is not a stronger mindset. It is not more gratitude and more hustle and more pushing through. The answer involves looking at the actual state of your actual foundation. And that means being honest about things that our culture teaches us to be embarrassed about, admitting that you are not safe, that you are genuinely, chronically, persistently unsafe, financially, emotionally, relationally, in ways that your nervous system knows, even when your conscious mind is telling you to suck it up, admitting that you do not actually belong anywhere, that the connections in your life, however numerous, do not include anyone who actually knows you at a level that matters, admitting that you do not truly believe your existence is valuable, not in the shallow affirmational sense, in the deep, quiet, unperformed sense, that when you are alone with yourself, with no audience and no achievement to point to, you feel like a person who is not quite enough. These are not pleasant things to admit. Your conditioning will resist them. Your culture will tell you that the people who admit these things are weak, that strength means pushing through, that acknowledging foundational need is giving up. And here is what I want to say to that resistance clearly and directly. The human mind does not negotiate with the reality of its own needs. You can tell yourself you are fine. You can perform strength. You can build extraordinary structures of achievement and discipline and public success on top of an unsatisfied foundation, and the foundation will still be unsatisfied. It does not care about your performance. It does not care how impressive the upper floors look. It will keep demanding what it requires, in the form of exhaustion, in the form of anxiety, in the form of the hollow emptiness that follows your successes instead of the satisfaction you expected. You cannot will your way past a structural deficit. You can only address it. And this is not defeatism. This is not an excuse to stop building. This is actually the most pragmatic thing you can hear. Because once you stop trying to bypass the foundation and start attending to it, the upper floors stop being a struggle and start becoming a natural expression of what you actually are. That is what self-actualization actually looks like when it is real. It is not straining towards something. It is something that happens when everything beneath it is adequately supported. It is not a destination you force yourself to reach. It is a natural emergence from a life that has been properly structured from the ground up. There is something Maslow said late in his life that I want to sit with for a moment, because it changes the way you hear everything else. He said that the story of human life is largely the story of people failing to become what they could have been, not because they did not want to, not because they were not capable, but because the conditions necessary for that becoming were never adequately provided, and they spent their lives trying to compensate for that absence in ways that were fundamentally unable to succeed. Think about what that means. Not in the abstract, in your own life, the things you have called your failures, the goals you abandoned, the potential you feel like you never reached, the version of yourself you can sense somewhere but have never quite been able to become. Maslow's framework says that in most cases, those things are not evidence of personal inadequacy. They are evidence of structural deprivation, of needs that were not met at the level where they needed to be met, and of the human organism doing exactly what it was designed to do when that happens, which is redirect its energy toward meeting those needs, even unconsciously, even in ways that are counterproductive or self-defeating, because the organism does not have a choice. A person who grew up without adequate safety does not grow up and then simply stop needing safety. They carry that need into adulthood, and it shapes every decision they make, every relationship they enter, every risk they take or refuse to take, every moment of irrational self-sabotage that they cannot explain with logic, because it does not come from logic. It comes from an older part of the brain that is still operating the protocol it learned in an unsafe environment, A person who grew up without belonging does not just decide at some point to belong. They carry a wound that makes belonging feel dangerous because the original belonging was taken away or was never offered. And the nervous system learned correctly that closeness is a threat. And so they push away what they most need, not because they are self-destructive, but because they are following the most sophisticated self-protection protocol available to them. A person who grew up without having their worth affirmed does not simply choose one day to believe in their own value. They construct elaborate systems of performance and achievement and productivity designed to generate external evidence of worth, because internal evidence has never been reliable. And they chase those systems all their lives, reaching milestone after milestone, each one promising to finally settle the question of their worth, each one failing to deliver because the question cannot be answered from the outside. This is not pathology. This is not dysfunction. This is the human organism, in its extraordinary complexity and resilience, doing exactly what it does when the architecture of need is disrupted. It adapts, it compensates, it finds substitute strategies. And it does all of this in a way that is largely invisible to the conscious mind, which means most people spend their entire lives treating the symptoms without ever understanding the structure. So what does this mean for you? Right now, today, in your actual life, it does not mean you need to find a new set of goals. It does not mean you need to abandon ambition or stop caring about growth or settle for less. It does not mean the upper floors do not matter. It means you need to stop and look honestly at the ground you are building on, not in a blaming way, not in a way that turns your history into a prison, but in a genuinely curious way. In the way a careful architect looks at a site before deciding what to build, with honesty about what is actually there, what is solid and what is not, what needs to be addressed before anything lasting can be constructed. Ask yourself, what in your life is providing or failing to provide real safety? Not the performance of stability. The actual felt sense that your environment is not actively threatening you. Where is that present? Where is it absent? Ask yourself where you actually belong, not where you are accepted conditionally based on what you produce or how you perform or how agreeable you are willing to be. Where are you known and wanted as a person, not as a function? Ask yourself what would need to be true for you to believe quietly, without any audience, that your existence has worth. Not what you would need to achieve. What would need to be true? Because the answer to that question tells you something important about which level of need is running most of your decisions right now. These are not comfortable questions. They are not the questions the productivity industry wants you to ask, because those questions lead to a very different set of answers than the ones that industry is selling. But they are the questions that actually matter, because they are the questions that point toward the real structure of your experience, rather than the story you have been told about why you are not happy yet. The calmest thing I can tell you, the thing I want you to sit with after this is over, is this. Your vagueness is not emptiness. Your exhaustion is not weakness. Your inability to feel genuinely motivated is not a character flaw. Your sense that something is missing, that persistent, quiet, impossible-to-name feeling that has followed you through every achievement and every disappointment, that feeling is not a disorder. It is data. It is your organism communicating, with precision and patience and remarkable clarity, exactly what it needs and is not receiving. The sadness you carry is not irrational. It is proportionate. It is the appropriate response to a structural gap between what a human being needs to fully exist and what your environment has provided. The fact that you have been told it is irrational, that you should be over it by now, that you have no right to feel it given everything you have, that telling does not make it true. It makes it lonelier. It adds shame to an already difficult experience. But it does not change the structure of what is actually happening. Maslow did not discover a theory. He described a reality about what it means to be a layered, complex, hierarchical creature in a world that mostly treats you as a flat machine. A reality about the conditions necessary for a human being to become what they are capable of becoming. A reality that is, once you see it, impossible to unsee. Because it explains too much. It makes sense of too many things that did not make sense before. The happiness limit is real, but it is not a ceiling above you. It is a floor beneath you. And the question is not how high you can push yourself. The question is how solidly you can build what needs to be there first. Everything above that foundation, every ambition, every expression of who you actually are, Every genuine moment of living the life you are capable of living, all of it becomes possible once the ground is real. Not easy, possible. And that is not nothing. In a world that keeps telling you the problem is your effort, learning that the problem might be your foundation is not a defeat. It is a reorientation. It is a different question. And different questions lead to different answers. And different answers, finally, might lead somewhere that the old questions never could. That is what Maslow gave us. Not a ladder to climb, a map to read honestly. Start at the bottom, not because the top does not matter, but because the top is only real when the bottom is real first. Take your time, be honest. Look at the actual ground you are standing on. Everything else follows from there. If what you heard today shifted something for you, if it gave you a different way to see your own experience, if it made something that was confusing feel a little clearer, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This kind of content takes real effort to make, and your support is what allows it to keep reaching people who need to hear it. Subscribe, like, and if you want to continue this conversation, leave a comment. I read them, and I will keep making this kind of reflection for as long as people are finding it useful. Thank you for being here. That genuinely matters.